Hello and welcome to Women of the Middle East podcast. This podcast relates the realities of Arab women and their rich and diverse experiences. It aims to present the multiplicity of their voices and wishes to break overdue cultural stereotypes about women of the Middle East. Season 5 is a collaboration between Musawah and Women of the Middle East podcast. As we will be discussing Musawah's latest book, Justice and Beauty in Muslim Marriage Towards Egalitarian Ethics and Laws, published by One World Academic in December of 2022. My name is Amal Malki. I'm a feminist, scholar, and an educator. This is Women of the Middle East podcast. Hello and welcome to Women of the Middle East podcast. This is season 5. Justice and Beauty in Muslim Marriage Towards an Egalitarian Ethics and Laws is an edited book that is made of 4 sections with a contribution of 17 authors. It has been gaining lots of attention and building its momentum across different genres and fields since its launch in November 2022, which is merely 2 to 3 months ago. In this episode, we host one of the book's editors who has also authored a chapter in the book, Dr. Mulki Al-Sharmani. Dr. Mulki, lovely to have you.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Our pleasure. Dr. Mulki, the introductory chapter by the volume's co-editors, you being one of them, provides an overview of the idea within the and connections with Men in Charge, Rethinking Authority in Muslim Legal Tradition, published in 2015, and the concepts of Qawama and Wilaya. It then outlines Musawah's holistic approach that combines Islamic teachings, international human rights standards, national laws, and constitutional guarantees of equality and acknowledgement of lived realities. Can you talk about this idea and how the idea of the book was conceived, and what, in your opinion, is the contribution of this book to the fields of feminist theory and Islamic studies?
Definitely, and thank you for your interest. Musawah, as you know, is a movement, led by Muslim women from all over the world, and we are interested in working towards the goal of justice in the Muslim family and specifically reforming Muslim family laws. We believe very much the importance of linking knowledge building with activism and building rigorous knowledge that makes the case for reform. And this book builds, as you mentioned, Dr. Amal, on our previous project. In the previous project, the Qawama and Wilaya project, and out of which came the book Men in Charge, we were interested in diagnosing the problem, getting to the substantive, the foundation of gender inequality in our Muslim legal tradition, focusing on these 2 juristic concepts of Qawama and Wilaya. Now, in this book, what we're trying to do is to reconstruct. We're trying to explore possibilities. Can we have different conceptions of marriage, ethical and legal frameworks for a marriage, Muslim marriage, that is based on equality, that is based on justice, that is based on the equal worth and the partnership of the 2 spouses, and can we make that case again based on a very solid knowledge from within our Islamic textual tradition. And because we adopt the holistic approach, we are interested in this book, we have been interested in trying to engage and do research with the Muslim legal tradition, textual tradition, from all its different aspects. So the first section is on the Quran. We have scholars working on Usul al-Fiqh, as well as Islamic law as a practice in the past, and modern family laws, and Sufism. So it's engaging with the Islamic textual tradition holistically from all its different textual genres. Our overall holistic approach also brings together Islamic textual teachings, human rights discourse, the local and national laws and constitutions that affirm equality of all citizens. And the 4th prong of our holistic approach is the lived reality, which is what we'll be focused on in the 2nd component of our research. So we're not done yet.
Oh, lovely. So tell me, what is it? What would the second part of the research be?
It will be focusing on the lived reality. So we will be doing an ethnographic research in 4 Muslim majority contexts from different regions, where we're trying again to explore and investigate through a ethnographic research, that is, alternative conceptions of marriage, and study initiatives for different models of marriage, different from the hierarchical model of marriage that we have in classical jurisprudence, and which is reflected in many of our Muslim family laws. And so initiatives as well as life experiences. And we'll be doing this research in Egypt, in Pakistan, in Indonesia, and also in Somaliland.
And Dr. Mulki, the framework of Islamic feminism, the amazing development is, besides Fatma Mernisi's work, of course, is the engaging with Al-Hadith as well, the Sunnah Nabawiyya in this book, whereas there were attempts to centralize or ground the argument of Islamic feminism within the Quran itself, trying to avoid al-hadith. What has been done in terms of adaptation to this framework to be focusing on al-hadith as well?
This is a very important question. Thank you for posing it. Yes, sometimes Islamic feminist scholars have been critiqued for focusing too much on the Quran and not engaging substantively with the Sunnah, the prophetic tradition, including the Hadith. Of course, Fatma Mernisi, the amazing scholar, may she rest in peace, was a pioneer in that area. And our knowledge produced through Musawah, definitely, because we believe in this holistic approach, we do and we try and we work on engaging with Islamic textual tradition from all its different genres. So even in our Men in Charge, we had a chapter on Hadith. This one we were very focused on, very rigorously at engaging with all the different sciences in Islamic interpretive tradition. So for example, the second section, we do the Sunnah. We have scholars who've worked on the Sunnah as the Sirah as well as the Hadith, because it's very important, since in the traditional Islamic legal theory, of course, Quran and Sunnah are the 2 main sources of the law. And also the important thing in this book is that we have one driving question that guides us all. We have a common ground, right? But at the same time, the authors, the individual scholars and authors try to address that question from their own angle and from their own perspective and using their own approach. So we very much also value and appreciate and foreground diversity in this edited volume. And Hadith is absolutely important. So for example, in addition to the section that you have in the book on the Sirah as well as the Hadith, 3 scholars. The first one is co-authored by our colleagues Dr. Shadab Rahmatullah and Dr. Sara Ababna together. It's a co-authored chapter. And then you have 2 on the Hadith by Dr. Yasmin Amin and Dr. Faqihuddin Qudir. And you'll find that they have very different approaches, but they are very much interested in the same question. And it was so important because often people say, okay, well, if you have a hadith that on the surface seems to be justifying discrimination against women and even misogyny, what do you do with that, especially if that hadith is found in Sahih al-Bukhari? We have Faqihuddin Qudir in his chapter really engaging with that question and putting forward a very innovative and new methodology of how you can read the hadith, but again holistically, reading the hadith in light of the Quran, in light of the overall principles of Islam, particularly grounded in the Quran, and also drawing on certain important principles from usul al-fiqh. So yes, engaging with the hadith and the different sciences in Islamic textual tradition and bringing them together is very much something that is important, so that we can make the case for gender equality on a solid, rigorous knowledge, and that's what we're trying to do.
Exactly, and I believe this is one of the main things that this book has done, and I foresee it also bringing different schools of feminisms and different school of thoughts together or in conversation with each other. So for you, as one of the central voices in discussions around gender relations and Islam and gender equality, what does Islamic feminism mean to you, and what do you think this book will be contributing to in terms of bringing those multiple voices or multiplicity of voices together?
Yeah, for me, I think Islamic feminism is very important field of inquiry. It's a knowledge project, and it's interested in doing two things. It's interested in mapping out, tracing patriarchy, religious patriarchy, and how it has been formed, how have authoritative patriarchal interpretations, whether in the tafsir or in the fiqh or in modern family laws that draw from the fiqh, where do they come from, how are they formed, how do we have them, and unpacking them. So doing a deconstruction work, but not stopping there, also doing reconstruction, providing alternatives, readings, not just egalitarian readings, but also a methodology of how to read our Islamic texts in a new way. So providing a methodological contribution as well as new readings. And I see it very important on several levels. It's important in terms of producing transformative knowledge that can contribute to policy making, to activism, to advocacy, and specifically to reform of the Muslim family law, and making sure that women scholars, activists have a voice, have a role in the religious domain and in the production of knowledge. That's on one hand, but I also see it as contributing to Islamic studies as an academic field in terms of its methodological contributions and in terms of how it also highlights really the strong relationship and between knowledge and power, and unpacking that.
Okay, following up on this point, how can we make sure as a feminist community that this valuable book is actually mainstreamed across different levels and used, referenced, and utilized by different communities across Muslim countries? So yes, this is an amazing contribution in terms of knowledge production to Islamic studies for sure, to feminist and feminist theory. But how can we make sure that this reaches where it's supposed to reach to impact change in our societies?
That is extremely important question, and in Musawah we are very much interested in that. We are interested in producing knowledge. We very much believe in the organic relationship between scholarship and activism. It's not just knowledge for the sake of knowledge, but knowledge that hopefully can make a change on the ground. And the way we do that is on different kinds of activities. Number one, for example, to give you a very concrete example, so this book, as well as the Men in Charge, we've produced what is called a feminist reader's guide, so short summaries of each chapter that has also questions, and then there'll be a reading group where people discuss the chapters. We have capacity building training courses that we offer all over the world, engaging with judges in family courts, lawyers, women's rights activists, university students, journalists, to share with them, to disseminate this knowledge. We also produce policy briefs and kind of like short briefs where we highlight the key points that policymakers or advocates can take away from this knowledge, as well as videos. So it's absolutely necessary that this be mainstreamed, and we do try to do that in the various activities that we do in Musawah, as well as we've translated this book into Arabic by a very well-established scholar who also a professor at Cairo University, Dr. Randa Abu Bakr, who already translated Men in Charge, and the Arabic book, inshallah, will be published in the coming months, and there will be as well an Arabic launch.
Dr. Mulki, how can we distinguish between Sharia and fiqh in a manner that allows us to lay the foundation of an egalitarian Muslim family law? What's the difference, and where can al-ijtihad come in?
We believe that actually language is also very important. The concepts we use are very important, and often they can be the source of the problem. They can, muddy the water. So just to give you a concrete example, when khula, this is the judicial khula, was legislated in Egypt in 2000, and this is a khula that allows women to petition for khula divorce through the court. She doesn't have to have any grounds, no fault grounds. She doesn't have to substantiate any harm, but in exchange, and the husband's consent is totally irrelevant. It's not required, but she gives up the dower and the post-divorce dues. Now, there was a big uproar in Egypt, and one of the arguments, religious arguments, that was put forward was that, oh, this is against the Sharia. Why is that? Because in the majority opinion among the classical jurists was as they understood khula as a kind of a divorce that a woman negotiates with her husband, therefore his consent is necessary. Although it's based on a verse in Surah Al-Baqarah 2229, as well as a very famous hadith, prophetic hadith, where a woman goes to Prophet Muhammad and tells him, my husband hasn't done me any wrong, but I just don't want to be with him. And he tells her, okay, fine, you're free to go, but you just have to give him back the dowry. So people would say in Egypt, oh, this is against the Sharia, but what they actually meant was, this is against a majority opinion in fiqh. Therefore, we are very focused in Musawah. Part of our work is also to clarify the concepts and the importance of conceptual clarity. So for Sharia is the path to God. It is the totality of the ideal of what God wants us to aspire to. It is not reducible to law. It is not fiqh. Fiqh is the human understanding. It's this important knowledge that our past jurists produced in their attempt to understand the Quran and the Sunnah. And they did an amazing work, right? But it's a human effort, so we can discuss it, we can revisit it, we can disagree among us. It is not Sharia. Sharia is the totality, the ideal teachings of God that we all aspire to. And etymologically, even it means the path to the water place, as we all know, those of us who speak Arabic, right? So, and the same thing, for example, for us, it's also important to highlight another difference which is established in fiqh between muamalat and ibadat, things that go under the muamalat are can be revisited, whereas ibadat, which has to do with the deeds regulating or concerned with our relationship with God, the ritual specifically, there's no room for ijtihad there. Marriage definitely is under the muamalat. And family relations, social relations in general, is under the muamalat, and therefore it can be revisited. So this is a very important question. Concepts and the clarity of concepts, and changing the language, clarifying the language, correcting the language is certainly a big part of our work.
It's what's interesting is that khula was approved as a form of divorce in Egypt, if I'm not mistaken, in 2000.
Yes.
Very recently, an MP in the Kuwaiti parliament declared that al-khula is not an acceptable or religious, an Islamic form of divorce, and should be banned in Kuwait, believe it or not,
wow.
in 2023.
But that's yes, the struggle goes on.
The struggle goes on, and as long as women are not seen as active agents in tackling or dealing with the sacred text, we are influenced easily by what men say. So if the parliamentarian says, although he could have no background in Sharia, no background in Islamic studies, but because he's a man and he has priority access, let's say, to the sacred text, how can we make sure that women are educated, women have access and know that they have the right, but also the responsibility of protecting their rights through having that access to the Quran?
That's so important. That's extremely important, and that is at the core of our mission and what we aspire for. that women to be producers of knowledge, to be teachers, to have a place, to have a role in the production of knowledge and its dissemination as well. We do it ourselves in Musawah through this collaborative work between different women scholars as well as men have this, but also really disseminating this knowledge and making it accessible through various ways in university settings, but also like these other mainstream formats as we discussed earlier. And you are absolutely right. It is really crucial that women have that knowledge. I've done research. I'm originally trained as an anthropologist, and I've done research in Egypt as well as in Finland, on Muslim family law and specifically on women's engagements with sacred texts and with laws. And I have seen how through ethnographic research again and again how it really makes a big difference when women have the knowledge of the laws, of the textual tradition, of their rights. Knowing and really makes a difference. There's research that proves that again and again. Another thing that we found from research, not only my own research but other research done by many colleagues in different parts of the world and focusing on Muslim communities, is that women more than ever are hungry for religious knowledge and are pursuing it from various ways. But there are different kinds of voices, religious voices and religious knowledge. So it's incumbent upon us that we are out there and we provide that knowledge and make it accessible.
My final question for you: what are the challenges? What are the challenges you face as a scholar, and what are the challenges that Muslim feminists or Islamic feminists face on daily basis to try to disseminate the knowledge? Just an example of this is this valuable book. What would you think the obstacles would be for you to disseminate the knowledge?
Well, I think, of course, sometimes it is known that in our part of the world, and I'm talking about the Arab world as well, I would say in quite a few Muslim majority contexts, but to be more specific, the Arab world, the feminism has a very bad reputation. It is associated with cultural imperialism. It is seen as something imposed from the West. It is often there's a very common reductionist understanding that there is one kind of feminism, and it's a feminism that comes from the West, that is hates men, that is out to destroy our families and lead to a divorce and create this adversarial relationship between men and women. And there might be that kind of feminism, yes, but feminism comes in all kinds of trends. And of course, we have to accept also and acknowledge that there was Western feminism that was that enabled colonialism and worked with it. So we have that legacy in our part of the world also. So sometimes the term itself it might be an obstacle, and we do have very important Islamic feminist scholars who they themselves have an issue with the term. They agree and they completely are committed to the work, the nature of the work, the goal of the work, but they have an issue with the term, and so that's one challenge. So sometimes I remember, like 2015, I was in this meeting in Alexandria with an NGO. It was a conference organized by an NGO, and we had ulama, religious scholars from Egypt, from the Azhar, but as well as from other Arab countries. And we were talking about, in Arabic, Niswa al-Islamiyya, Islamic feminism, and there were a lot of resistance. What is this Niswa al-Islamiyya? But once we got to the core of the issues, like, okay, what do the books of fiqh say? What does the Quran say? What are the central principles of Islam? How about now that we are nation states? What do our constitutions say? How do we understand citizenship? And once we got to the substance of it, there was a lot of space and common ground where we could debate and discuss and agree. So one also have to be strategic, like because it's we can't also be talking simply to the people who are like-minded, like, you know. So in order to create that constructive debate, we do engage with religious scholars. We've done it in Morocco, we've done it with religious scholars in Palestine through Zoom, and also in Egypt several times. It's not easy by any means. We try not to get bogged down with the terminology and terms about Niswa Islamiyya, but talk about the substance and start with the common grounds and try to have a constructive dialogue. The other challenge that we often have, and I'm sure Dr. Amal, you're familiar with it also, is that we're told you don't have authority. You don't have, you're not traditionally trained. Who are you to talk about these things? But then when we try to show that, okay, no, we've done our homework. We are, as scholar activists, we've done the work. We know the primary texts. We know the language. We know the methodology of the past jurists and the exegists, and you know, and we are trying to make a case on a scientific basis. We make some headways, but there are also these challenges. So I think one way is to strategically try to be aware and cognizant, like who are we engaging with, what works, how can we create a common ground so that we can have a constructive dialogue with people who disagree with us so that we can get somewhere. But at the same time, to be aware sometimes of the limitations and try to make headway in some spaces, and be aware in other spaces it might take longer. But I'm very optimistic also. So I remember that was 2015, as I told you, and there was this resistance. So what is this Niswa Islamiyya? Since then, people have been talking about it a lot in Egypt. There have been talks about it, and right just before we started our conversation now, I'm working on a book now about Islamic feminism, and I was doing some research going through newspapers in Egypt, and there was this one of the magazines has done like 17 issues and counting about Niswa Islamiyya, Islamic feminism, which is very interesting. So there are challenges, but I think we need to continue being engaged, I would say.
Yeah, and I think you have your heart in the right place, because I love what you said about a scholar activist. I think I want to adopt this, if you don't mind, from now on. A scholar activist, exactly, as long as the knowledge we're producing is for the sake of to better our communities, to make a constructive change within our communities, then even our work and the efforts we put into books that take 3 and 4 years are worth putting, I guess.
I totally agree with you. And also I find this work because I work at the University of Helsinki, and and I'm part of the Musawah. I really find it my work with Musawah extremely rewarding on so many levels. Most of all, spiritually also. Spiritually, because we live, all of us, Muslims, non-Muslims, we live in very difficult times, and more than ever, I think we live in times where we really need to find our ethical moorings and to be grounded in it. And to do this kind of work, I think makes one be aware of what is relevant, what is important, and most of all to do it collaboratively, and and in a way that that helps us also combat our ego, because we're human nature, and not to take ourselves very seriously, and to be connected. And it's not just about me, but also what is good for all of us.
I agree. Lovely. Thank you, Dr. Mulki. Thank you so much for being with us in Women of the Middle East podcast. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Isabella.
Thank you.
The pleasure has been mine.
This is Women of the Middle East podcast. Hope you enjoyed this episode of Season 5. To stay up to date with Women of the Middle East podcast, you can subscribe, and don't forget to rate us. If you would like to contact me directly, you can do so on Instagram or Twitter, or via email. This is Women of the Middle East podcast.